Today we are going to look at actually painting a painting together. What I'd like for you to do is take out the paper that you've been given that has a copy of this image here. And what I want for you to do is follow along while we paint and look at this. It's going to help you figure out where different lines go and different types of painting. So if you look here, we have a lake that's been sketched out. And then over here we have some land. And in the back we have some trees. And then we have a sky. And on here there's different directions, and I'm going to go through with you and kind of fill in those directions in those areas with the different types of painting, different colors and different techniques. So all you have to do is look at your pre-sketched canvas, and you should have been provided with a canvas that looks a lot like this, so very similar to the paper that's right here. And you're just going to go ahead and follow along. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get out some black and white paint, and I like to use little trays that I find around from like fast food and stuff like that, but you can use a piece of paper. Another thing that works really well is you can use a garbage bag and put it on your entire table, and then while you're painting, put some of the paint that you're painting with around that so you can mix it right in there in the plastic. That's an easy cleanup when you're all done. As long as you don't use too much paint, you can wrap it all up and chuck it away. Okay, so I also have here today my red paint, my yellow paint, and my blue paint. As we talked about before, we're going to be mixing our colors. We didn't provide you with secondary colors, although I have a sneaking suspicion I might be sending some royal purple along just in case. Now remember that these are lower pigment paints, and they are not heavy body, which means they're not thick, and they don't have a lot of pow color packed to them. So all of our colors are going to come out a little bit more gentle. When you're first learning to paint, you really just want to kind of see how these things work. If you really get into painting, go out there and spend some money and get a starter set of acrylic paint. Something that I would recommend is a brand called Master's Touch. I like them. You can get them at Hobby Lobby. They're very reasonable. Okay, so let's get this back in here so we can actually see it a little bit better. And you're going to want to make sure that when you're painting that you push your sleeves up, because let me tell you, you'll get dirty. So pushing your sleeves up. Now the first thing we're looking at here is we're going to start on our sky. And if you look here, it says wet on wet. Okay, wet on wet means that you're going to take a brush like so, and you are going to dab it in, wake your brush up like you always do. Oh, this brush is very sleepy. Wake up, brush, we have work to do. Okay, get the extra water out there like so. Okay, and then you can kind of reshape your brush here. Mine has a lot of fixative on it. When brushes get sent to you from the factory, they have like a glue on them. Sometimes they overdo it. They definitely overdid it with this fella. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean that off some more. All right, so my brush has been shaped. I'm gonna go over here and get some water, and I am going to paint my sky with water. That's it. Just paint your sky with some water, going all throughout your sky. Paint the whole thing with water. The whole sky with water, with water, with water. And this might take you a couple minutes. That's okay. And also don't worry if it soaks into your canvas a little bit. That's what it's supposed to do, okay? Now we want to make sure that there's a nice thin layer of water on here. And we're going to let it sit for just a moment. We'll come back in a couple minutes. Now that that's kind of sat there, what we're going to do is we are going to go over here and we're going to take some of our white. We're going to roll it around like this, kind of dance it. A little bippity bop dance, like so. And we are going to cover our sky back in with white. And we're doing that because we want a creamy sky. A creamy sky to start out with. Now you don't need too much water to begin with, because this paint is already kind of a watery paint, okay? And don't worry if you overdo it a little bit, you can always go back up. I'll show you how to do that actually here. Let me pretend like I put too much on here. Too much water and too much paint. There you go, you overdid it. Looks like mayonnaise, no big deal. Put your brush away, come on over here. And just dab a little bit like that till it soaks it up just a little bit. You'll get these kind of spongy marks, but it doesn't really matter because we're going to kind of dull those down in a second. Then of course, take your paper towel, turn it inside out, and put it over here. This only if you overdid it though, okay? So if you didn't overdo it, you're in good shape. Now it's important when you're painting to use a little bit of water on your brush, but you don't want it drippy. If it's drippy, you're not going to be able to control your paint and it's not going to work out good for you. It's going to be bad. So I'm going to smooth out my sky, nice and smoothed out with white. And it's okay to go into your trees. I'd rather you paint into stuff than not paint it at all. Okay, so don't be nervous about going into there. So what we're going to do first is we need to make a nice sky yellow. And it's already got white in it, so all we have to do is dip into our yellow paint just a little bit, and we're going to start right up here. And we're going to put some yellow paint in sideways. And notice how I'm turning my brush this way, and I'm holding it like this. And I'm making long, choppy brush strokes. I'm not smashing the whole thing down, okay? I'm gently gliding it across like this. And see how I even go into my trees? Doesn't matter, it's okay. So I'm gonna let these brush strokes show up all over the place around here, like this. I'm gonna go back and get a little bit more, start in the middle again. And as I'm going around, I'm losing paint. It naturally just kind of is more yellow in the middle. And that's good. If your sun isn't in the exact same spot mine is, it doesn't really matter. Just make sure when we do the reflections later that you move your reflection. Okay, so what we want next is to mix kind of a peach color. Now, a peach color is a little bit of white, okay, a little bit of red, and a little bit of yellow. More yellow than less. Because remember, we talked about before in color mixing that yellow is a very thin paint naturally. The pigment or the stuff that makes it a certain color just isn't very bright by itself. And a lot of the stuff that they use to keep it together, like a kind of a glue for paint that mixes it and keeps it together, isn't also very strong. So it tends to be a little bit thinner. So you want to use more yellow and less of your other colors. Okay, so what we're going to do over here is we're going to do the same type of thing, but we're going to start out on the corners like this. Starting on the corners. And we're still doing stripes like this. And I call this the pendulum stroke. Okay? Because if you've ever seen a pendulum, I'll do it from the side here like this. A pendulum swings, it goes. Well, we're doing the same thing. We're using a pendulum stroke like this. See how the brush lifts up? That's exactly what we're looking for. So we're going to do some on the other side. And when you get your paint, roll through and scoot off the extra paint. Starting over here, try to move so you can see a little bit better. Doing the pendulum swing all throughout the sides. And it's going to kind of scoot its way towards the middle like that. Okay. Now what we're going to do while the paint is still wet, we are going to get off the extra. We're going to go ahead and wash our brush. To wash your brush, straight up and down, swirl. Straight up and down, swirl. Straight up and down, and swirl. And you just want to make sure that the brush is about 90% clean. There's always going to be a little bit until you wash it in a sink that lives right at the top there. If it bugs you, just squeeze it out, okay? So what we're going to do over here is we are going to go ahead and blend this out. And what we do is we don't have any extra water here. Our paint is still wet. It's plenty wet to move around. And then we're going to go back and forth in the middle like this. And a little bit on the sides of the yellow. Back and forth. See how it blends out so nicely? Looks nice and calm there so far, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I want a little bit more kapow coming out of the sides there. So I'm going to grab some more red and add it to my peach. And I'm going to go ahead and grab some more yellow and mix it in there. And all this is doing is it's making the color on one side of the peach a little bit brighter and stronger. Okay, because remember we talked about before, if you add white to something, that turns it into what we call a tint, but it also makes it more chill, more neutral, and not as saturated, which means with color. So I'm gonna go ahead and add some more here, a little bit there, till I get the color how I like it. All right, that's better. Okay, so I'm gonna start out in the corners over here. gonna do the same thing. And it's important to realize too, as you are painting, there's gonna be times where you come into a color and you're like, oh geez, it's dragging real weird, it feels weird. If it feels kind of crunchy on your canvas or like chalk, you need water, okay? Mine hasn't gotten to that point yet, but it probably will eventually. I should mention that the brush that I'm using is a flat brush, okay? You have other brushes, or if you can't find a brush, you can use other brushes, but it's a lot easier to use this technique if you're using a flat brush or a very large Phillips brush, not like this guy. See how he's rounded at the top like that, but flat on the sides? You have a brush like that, you can use a big version of that too. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and get the extra paint off my brush. I'm gonna put it in my paper towel and squeeze because I just want it flavored, just a little flavor on there. I'm gonna go on the edges here and I'm going to flick. And I'm using the thick side. Flick, 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 like that. Real gentle, and you wanna drag it like it's a little butterfly, like you're petting a butterfly. The surface is a little butterfly, and you wanna give them just a little nudge, little back massage for a butterfly. Be gentle with it. All right, this guy's looking pretty nice so far. So we're gonna go ahead and clean off our brush, and we'll come back in later when that dries and brighten it, because yellow paint also needs a chance to dry more so than other paints because it is so thin. And if you keep mixing it and adding it in here, nothing much is gonna change. So that's important to realize. So what we're gonna do next is we're actually gonna jump around. Usually when you paint something, you paint from background to foreground, okay? Some artists like to do it backwards, but when you're first learning, you wanna paint from the back of the picture to the front. So the back is our sky, and then it would be our trees, and then it would be kind of half and half here, our land and our water, okay? And we're gonna do that a little bit, but not quite as heavy as some people do. So for this next section, I would like for you to go ahead and make sure that your space is nice and clean here, okay? And also don't worry about your water. If your water is looking thin, it doesn't matter the color, you're in good shape. If you pull it on the sides and you can see it, that it's still clearish, you're in good shape. If it starts to look thick like a soup, guess what? Time to change your water. Here comes the next section. So what we're gonna wanna do here is you are gonna wanna go ahead and get yourself out a filbert brush. If you got one of the packs that we have here, this is a filbert brush here. This is a number 3 filbert, okay? And 3 is just the size, that's all. And if you look there, you can see that it's rounded like that and then flat on the sides, okay? And this is a good brush for blending, but it's also a good brush for smushing, which is called stippling, okay? So as you can see here, what we did is we went over and we did the wet on wet, like we said we were gonna do right here, okay, with the pendulum stroke. And we did warmer in the middle, which is our yellow, and cooler on the sides, which is our pink, okay? Now we're gonna do something called stippling. Now things that are in the background are not as dark or as colorful as things that are close to us. So these trees over here need to be kind of a mucky kind of green, like it's distant. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and make a green. Green is made from yellow. Remember, you wanna take more yellow. Usually our recipe is a half and half to get a secondary color, but we need more yellow because yellow is a thin paint. Then I'm gonna go ahead and get the extra paint off like that. Some people only use different utensils to scoop instead of their brush, but I don't like washing 50 different things by the time I'm done. I'm a lazy artist. I like to paint. I don't like to clean. Let's go ahead and mix this up, and it's gonna give you a beautiful spring green. Okay, and spring green is great, but we also need a dark green. So we can put green over here. I'm gonna put some right there, like that. Now there's 2 ways you can make a spring green or a darker green. You can grab a teensy little bit of black, and I mean a real little bit. If you're scared, use the end of your brush and darken it like this. So it starts to become more olive, okay? There's also another way to darken a green, which is, does anybody remember? I'm gonna put it up on the screen here. I'm gonna give you a second. What can you do to make a color darker, not using black? Survey says it is close. It's red. You would go ahead and add a little bit of red, which is called a complementary color. That's a color that's on opposite side of the color wheel. All right, so now we have a nice darkish green, kind of an olivey color. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we are going to smush. And when I'm smushing, I'm making sure to turn my brush like so. Getting some more, I'm smushing. I'm just going straight up and down, but I'm turning my brush, and I'm not turning my brush like this. I don't set it down and then turn it. That doesn't get you what we want. We're doing like a boppy little dance like this, like we're jumping up and then we're smushing down. And don't try to make it all exactly the same color. That is not what we're trying to do. Now we're gonna go over here, do the same thing. I'm gonna go all the way across our tree line over there, and make sure you turn your brush because it'll make your trees look more realistic. Remember, it's just an idea of a tree. We're not actually making real trees right now. What we're making is a bunch of smooshes that our brain goes, oh, you know what? When I've seen trees in the distance, they looked a lot like that. That must be trees. So we don't always have to paint something super hyper realistic. That's not what we're learning about right now. Okay, so we have our tree line there. Gonna let that sit for just a second. And since the yellow is gonna be in the middle here, we're gonna brighten it up. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna squeeze out my green, squeeze it out, and I'm gonna get some more yellow on my brush, and I'm gonna come on over here and I'm going to put some yellow into these trees, a little bit more yellow there, in the areas that is close to the sun. Like so. See how that changes nicely there? Just a little difference makes it look kind of sunny there. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean off my brush. We're gonna let that sit for a little bit because when you're painting, you can just sit and wait for your paint to dry. But as you know, the saying goes, what are you doing? Sitting around watching paint to dry? Yeah, it's pretty boring, right? So in painting, you can come back to your artwork when this part is dry, or you can move on to another section. I'm gonna show you how to move on to another section while this is drying, and then we'll pop back on top of it. So this is what we did here. This is called stippling. The techniques that we did in the trees when you go straight up and down like a little piston, that's called stippling, okay? And it's really useful for all kinds of things, especially things that are organic, things that are found in nature like trees and clouds and wave crashes and things like that. It's also a very good blender if you do it real gentle and very small. All right, so what we're gonna do next is we are going to do the water, okay? Now the water here, we actually want to make kind of a brown color. Now, do you remember how to make brown? Come on, you can do it. It is actually a little bit of all the primary colors. So it's a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, and a little bit of yellow, okay? So in order to do that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move some of my brushes here, make myself some room. I'm gonna take some of my yellow, put it right here off to the side, a little bit of blue, and a little bit of red. When you're getting your paint, it is important that you pull your paint from the side or you use something else to scoop it. So some people do is they have palette knives or little tiny spoons, and they just go bloop, bloop, bloop each time they need paint, okay? That way you won't get paint disturbed in here. It'll be all different colors. We want to keep these pretty close to the same color that they came in at, okay? So I'm over here. I'm going to scooch this a little bit so you can see. I'm going to go ahead and mix these colors up. Ooh, I'm getting a green. I need way more red. So I'm going to scoop that off a little bit there, get some more red. Another way to get kind of a brown color is you can go ahead and mix some red with a lot of green, okay? So that's pretty good. I'm gonna add a little bit of black to this, just a teensy bit to darken it up a little bit. It's definitely more of a red brown. That's almost purpley. Yeah, that's good enough for our needs. Okay. So what we're gonna do over here is we're gonna go over by our trees area here, and there's a line there, and what we're going to do is we're going to turn our brush sideways, and we are going to kind of go out this way, and we're going to sketch a line across. And we're going to try to keep it kind of flat. Okay, that's kind of important. All right, then what we're going to do next is we are going to scumble. Now, scumble is kind of like scribbling. So we're going to take our brush and we're going to lay it down flat like this. And we are going to sketch around a little bit here, a little bit there, like this, kind of sketching. And remember, I'm laying my brush kind of flat like this, and I'm not pushing up, I'm only going sideways. Okay, only going sideways, that's important. When you're putting these little kind of scumbly, chalky little stripes in there, and this is all dry now, so you'll see this is called wet on dry, okay, because, well, we're painting with wet paint on a dry surface, okay, and the light can't see back here, so we want to make sure that that's nice and dark, but in natural water, there's also a lot of browns because you see kind of the murkiness of the water underneath. So we're going to let that sit for a second, okay, and what we're going to do is remember our green that's back here. Remember our green? We're going to take a little bit of our spring green, like so, and we're going to put it right there. We'll grab a little bit of our brown, mix it in there, and then what we're going to do is we're going to come underneath our trees here, like that. Oops. And we're going to add a little bit of this towards the bottom, and we're going to stipple. And notice how it kind of makes the bottom of our trees look a little bit darker, like so. Okay, there you go, starting to get a nice change going on there. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and clean our brush off, like so. Make sure you wash it off real well, going straight up and down, and then sideways, swirling around, straight up and down, swirl, straight up and down, swirl. Think of it like churning butter or plunging a toilet. You want to be careful not to smash hard. That's a good way to ruin your brushes. Remember, treat your brushes like you would treat your best friend, okay? Treat them well and they'll treat you well. Golden rule. Now, we're going to let this sit for just a second, but we are going to start putting in some other colors. Now, we have some colors up here in our sunset that we need to put in, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to get some of our yellow. We're going to get a little bit of yellow. And we're going to put it over here, maybe a little bit more than that, there you go. And we're going to get a scoop of white, and we're going to put it over here, right next to the yellow, and we're going to mix half the yellow into half the white, or you can just do the whole thing, that's fine. You can always go get more yellow if you need it. Okay, and I'm going to pull through my paint like this. I want to pull through it like that, so that my brush shape is kind of almost sharp on the top like that. See it? Good job. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn my brush sideways, and I'm going to scribble in some of the in-between areas like this. You can kind of put a little bit here and a little bit there, wherever you kind of want it. Like so. And make sure not to put it directly on top of your brown. If you do, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. But we're kind of skipping around. So kind of making little lines there. Don't think too hard about it, just little skippity-doos. What we're going to do next is we've got to use a little bit of our peach. So we're going to come over here and we're going to get our peach. You can get some of the darker peach or the lighter peach, whichever you want. And we're going to turn it sideways, real gentle, like you're going to be going like this, but for you to see, I'm going to go sideways like this a little bit. So remember, you're going like this, gentle. And all you're doing is just dragging it. You just touch it to the surface and move your arm. Okay, you don't have to do anything else. So going back and forth like this, adding some of those in, some here like that, a little bit there, little dashes here and there, that, a little bit of peach, adding some in, a little bit here and there. All right. All right, so now that that's drying, we're gonna let it sit here for a second, okay? And we're gonna go back to our sky area. So we wanna make sure that our sun feels real bright and cheerful. our yellow's dry now, at least it should be. Go ahead and clean off your brush, plunge and swirl, get your extra water off. You just want your brush soft, so when you pet it like this, you know that's a little bit wet, but you don't want it drippy. We want to use mostly paint right now. So I'm going to go ahead and get some of my yellow paint on here. I'm going to go right into my little area here where it's mostly yellow, and I'm going to start in the middle, make kind of like a circle like that, but we're not leaving it like that, okay? What we're going to do is we are going to very gently brush from side to side like this. Side to side, like that. And then here comes the fun part. We're going to go over here and get a little bit of our white. We're going to put it off the side, get a little bit of some yellow, mix it together on our finger. Don't be afraid. So use the ball of your finger, come up here into the sky, swirl around in a circle. There you go. You have your little sun there. Okay, and let that sit and it starts to dry. Now this paint is thin. If you don't use a lot of it, it will dry very quickly, which is a good thing if you like to move quickly throughout and you're trying different things, but it can also be kind of bad because when you want to go to blend an area, it's real hard to do, okay? So acrylic paint makes you work a little faster. It's kind of the opposite of oil painting and the opposite of definitely oil or watercolor too. Those both require time, most of the time. Okay, so we're gonna wanna do here is we're gonna want to make kind of a dusky green that's gonna go in here. And guess what? We already have a dusky green, right? So we know that we take our spring green and add a little bit over here and a little tiny bit of brown, mix it together. And it's okay if you don't have any brown left. Remember, you use a teensy tiny little bit of red and you'll get the same thing. And now what we wanna do is we want to come down here in the back and we wanna add some hints of green throughout there, like so. Little bits here and there. Little bit here and there, all around. Don't worry if you go into your land over here, it does not matter, okay, I promise. A lot of times people get so nervous, oh, what if I go over something I drew on? It doesn't matter, it's okay. Just go for it, you got it. All right, going through there. That looks pretty decent. We'll let that sit for a little bit. And I'm gonna go ahead and clean off my brush. Plunge and swirl, plunge and swirl. Now, if you notice here, this says flatter lines closer together up here. And notice how the lines are kind of smushed that are in there. And they're not just perfect little lines. Some of them are dashes and things like that. It doesn't matter as long as they're smushed together. They're nice and long, okay? And then over here it says curve stroke. Okay, curve stroke I'm going to show you here in just a second. We'll put that in once we put in our kind of dusky blue color here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to grab a little bit of blue. You don't need a lot. Put it off to the side. Get a little bit of white. Put it off to the side. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we need to add in some duskiness to it. We need to get some black to it. There we go. All right. We don't want too much, so what we're going to do is we're going to get the extra off like this, or you can scrape it off on the side of your palette over here. It doesn't really matter. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to find the areas where there's not a lot of color, and we're going to scribble in those areas. So kind of scribble around like this. Scribble, scribble. Scribble, scribble. Get yourself a teensy bit of water, and when you go and get water for painting, guys, don't bam right in there. What you want to do is you want to slip right down the side and just a little tip toe right in there. Imagine that you have a little pixie toe, and you're a little fairy, and you just bloop right there. That's all you need. Okay? And if you overdo it, you can always go blop right on your paper towel. So I'm going over here. These areas there. Getting some more. Making sure to grab a little bit of my water. So a lot of times when people teach water, they show you how to do water with wet on wet. You can definitely do water with wet on wet, but I think this works really well because it shows you how color sits next to each other works nicely. Okay, going side to side, and you can, when you're doing that, just little gentle skips, and some pendulum swings like this, gentle little skips like that. Okay, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go sideways from the side of our water inward like this. I'm going to go get some brown and make this area here darker, just because it's almost always darker over there. I'm going to go ahead and clean off my brush. Get rid of that. And while that is sitting there, we'll bop on up to our trees again. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of white. I'm going to put it right over here in my yellow pile. Yours is probably almost dry, like mine is. This paint dries real quick. Mix it together. So we have some nice light daffodil yellow. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some of that paint off, and then I'm going to go straight up and down, smush, 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 like this, gentle. So I'm going to make my brush a little wild. Don't press super hard. You can ruin your brush like that if you do it a lot. You just want the top to look a little wild like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently dance at the top of my trees, here and there. Bipping and bopping. Don't try to make it look like anything. Just be kind of random about it. The less hard you try, the better it's going to look. Same thing, gonna get a little bit over there. Bip and bop over there like that. At the top of my trees, a little bit down. Doing that all around. All right, good job. Okay, so next what we're gonna do is we are going to go ahead and work on some of the grass. The grass is very similar to the water, except it's different colors. And there's some other things that happen over here. So it goes from wet on wet up here to stipple and dry brush. And you haven't learned dry brush yet, I'll show you. And then pure stipple down here. Okay, so what's gonna happen is we need to clean this big old brush off. And I'm still using a filbert brush right now. To make it a little bit easier, I'm gonna go ahead and switch back to my flat brush. Flat brush is flat because it looks like a square or a rectangle, and you turn it sideways, it's very flat there. So when you drag it, it's flat, or when you go like this, it makes a flat line. So what I'm gonna need back here is a nice dark green. So I'm almost out of green, so I'm gonna start a little pile right over here, so you can see a little bit. I'm gonna grab a little bit of my blue. Remember, a little bit goes a long way. I'm gonna mix my nice green. But I do want it to be darker, so I'm gonna grab some black, just for quickness. Nice and dark. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come over here into the back where my land is, okay? And I'm going to scribble like that near the edge. I'm just going sideways. And I'm going to gently use my pendulum swing back and forth, picking up some more paint. Let different brush strokes happen. Don't try to fix them. If you're going sideways like that, you're doing a good job. Okay, and we get to our land here. We want to kind of plop, plop, plop. So we're setting it down and pulling, setting it down and pulling like this. Don't worry if it goes some into your water, that's perfect. That's actually very helpful. Okay. I'm just adding little brush strokes back here, and you can even go into your trees a little bit if you go sideways like this. And little blop, blop, blops of stipple, kind of blend it together. Okay, going out this way. That was dry on dry. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and put water down, a decent amount of water, right through here, like that. Make it a little bit more watery. And when I'm doing that, the water is kind of making strokes in between. It'll bleed out a little bit like that, where it gets kind of fuzzy. And I don't really want that too much. So I need to control the amount of paint I'm using by adding a little bit thicker paint throughout that, like that. There we go. Okay, and as we're getting down here, things that are closer to us we can see a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to stamp and do the stippling down this way, because that appears to be texture, and we see texture better closer to us. So I'm picking up some more there. Texture, texture, texture. I'm doing this wherever my land is, kind of outlining it a little bit just so I don't go overboard. Like so. Get some more. Like that. And when your paint is thin, sometimes that can be actually kind of helpful, because when you stipple, if you're doing something that's already light, you don't need a lot of lighter colors to add in, because peekaboo through your canvas underneath is very helpful. All right, so we have that there. The last thing that we need for our land is we need a little bit more darkness in it. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of black to this. There. Go back there, add some in. And I'm making strokes, going back and forth like this. Letting some of the stuff peekaboo through. And as I'm going down this way, kind of pressing down a little bit more. When they're farther away, they're smooshed. Remember, anything that's farther away you can't see as well, so it feels smooshed. And then when I'm getting down here, I'm going to suddenly start adding in stipples like this. So I had the light down, now I'm doing the dark on top of it. You could do it the opposite way too. If you want to start with dark and then do light on top of it, that's okay too. As long as you have both in there for this. Okay. All right, and then the last thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and clean our brushes off. Get rid of that extra stuff. We want to get rid of the extra water that's on here. And what we're going to do over here is we are going to make little curve strokes. Some people call them U strokes, okay? But I don't really refer to them to that anymore, because I just feel like it confuses people, because it doesn't have to be in the shape of an actual U. Bloop. It just means a curved stroke. And a curved brush stroke is kind of easy to do. It just means when you're using it like this, you go whoop, whoop, whoop each time. It also helps if you make that noise. Whoop, whoop, whoop. All right, drying this off a little bit. Get rid of the extra. Count down to 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna take this and we're gonna drag it through some paint, yellow paint probably. And right up about here, we're gonna start making little kind of dashes like this. So find some of the areas that aren't yellowish and make some gentle little dashes like this. Go up a couple places up here, a couple little dashes like that. Okay. Gentle, and all you're doing is just touching it to the surface. It's a flat brush, so it's like that. And when you get back here, you can do that a couple places too. Make sure they stay flat. Don't go up and down or sideways. They want to stay real flat. Okay, like so. And if you're feeling frustrated out there, remember, this is one of your first times that you're painting, okay? And you can stop the video at any point, and guess what? If you don't like your painting, you can just paint it all white and start again, okay? It's not gonna hurt anything. All right, so what we're gonna do over here is we're gonna take our brush and we are gonna make curved brush strokes with it instead. Just go ahead and put them right over the brush strokes that are already there. Curved brush strokes, like that. And get a little bit more. A little bit more. Oops, got a little bit of green in there. That's okay. A little bit like this. And your brush strokes don't have to be a perfect whoop. We're not looking for that. Remember, they're just little guys. So you're making little gentle U's, and it doesn't seem like much, but it adds motion. So anything that's curved, we talked about that before in our drawing classes, right? In our study of lines, anything that's curved feels, one, natural, but also feels like it has energy. So it means it feels like it's gonna do something or move. All right, well, for a beginning painting with a non-heavy body acrylic and a low pigment paint set, I think this is coming out pretty nice. So if you want to add anything to the end here, you can. You want to put something silly in there, like a couple little flowers or something, you can, but this is the painting that we did. So let's review real quickly. Put your brush in your water, get into the habit of doing that. Bring this over here. Now remember that the top is wet on wet. We did wet water and then we did wet paint on it. We went from cooler on the outside, okay, colors that feel like they're getting a little colder, all right, from warmer in the middle, all right. So there they are, and we used a pendulum stroke, which means we went like this with our paintbrush, okay, and it hit in the middle and then it picked up on the sides. Then we did stipple over here. We did kind of a yucky green with kind of a lighter yellow in the middle on top of it. And then at the end, a little bit of a whitish yellow on there. And all we did as the stipple is you go straight up and down like a piston, like you're a robot, and you make sure to turn the brush while you're doing it. Then we went and we started our brown over here in our water, and we used what was called a scumble, where we turned our brush flat and we kind of scribbled with it a little bit. We dragged it from side to side. We did that with a lot of different colors. While that was drying, we came over here and we did some dry on dry and some wet on wet. And then we changed to a stipple. The thing that I did not teach you was the dry brush, okay? And we don't really actually have a good place to do dry brush on here, so I'm probably gonna teach that actually at another time, okay? So don't use dry brush. If you do have it on here, you can use it if you know how to do it, but I actually am not gonna teach it on this one. And then down here we had stipple, okay? And stippling is the same as we did up here, it's just different. Colors that are closer to us we can see better, they're brighter, or they're darker, they have more contrast, light against dark, or we have more details, we can see little things closer to us better, okay? So that's your painting for today. Make sure you practice your colors and your color wheels. If you're confused about color and you're not sure how it works, go back and watch the videos on color. There's plenty of them, plus lots of explanation sheets. If you need additional sheets, let us know. We can also email some to you. All right, well, I hope you had fun with that. If you have questions, as always, you know where to send them. Look forward to the next painting, which is going to be learning how to do a radial gradient, which just means painting in a circle, okay? And then we're gonna work on finer lines, how to make fine lines with brushes, thin lines. See you then.